I made one move in 1 second. I blundered my bishop in just 2 moves, and that was the most amazing blunder of my entire chess career. That was so brilliant that my opponent immediately accused me of being a cheater. What's up, chess player, and welcome to the Journey to Grandmaster, the place where you can improve every aspect of your chess game. 99.5% accuracy, that is absolutely astonishing. That is probably the most accurate game I have ever played in my life. Let's take a look at it. But first of all, the first step to play a great game of chess, like a brilliant game of chess, is to know what you're doing in the opening. If you don't understand the type of position you're playing, you're going to be busted, you're going to make a lot of mistakes. But I'm playing d6. That is the opening that I know the best of all openings in chess. That is the opening that I always recommend because it's incredibly solid, it's incredibly flexible, and you can play it against no matter what your opponent does. So c4, I'm playing knight d7, and my idea is to play e5, and that is of course what I'm doing. My opponent is a very strong player. He is just controlling all of the center and makes it more difficult for me. Of course, I'm playing as black, I'm more passive, so let's see what happens here. Bishop goes to e7, bishop e2, castles, castles, and c6. c6 is the most important move here because this pawn is controlling all of the key squares and especially d5, not allowing his knights to go forward. And then my plan is to launch an attack on the queen side, so I'm playing the move a6, I'm preparing the move b5 here. He plays rook b1, I go b5. He plays b4 here. Well, that's clear, there is some tension in the center. I'm playing here queen to c7 just to develop another piece and to protect the e5 pawn one more time. That's basically the only move that chess.com doesn't say that it's the best one or it's an excellent or a brilliant one. I mean, that is a truly special and amazing game for me. So please watch till the end because this combination will absolutely blow your mind. My opponent plays a4. He wants to put more pressure on my pawns here. b5 is definitely hanging here, so he has to do something about it. And you see he has a lot of pawns there on the fourth rank, so that might be scary. But now I realize it's time for me to exchange a little bit of pawns and go on with some activity in the center, because otherwise he's gonna just come after me and gonna crush me. I can't stay too passive. You always have to fight for the initiative. That is the #1 strategic principle that you need to master in chess. And by the way, here I have made a dedicated video about that. Definitely take a look. That is incredibly important. So I'm doing it here. I'm fighting for the initiative because I'm taking on c4 first, then I'm taking on d4. Then I'm playing knight e5. I mean, with every move, I'm creating a new threat for my opponent. That is very important to make the life of your opponent as miserable as possible. And if you create those threats with your every move, it's much more difficult to play for your opponent. That is what puts pressure, and that is how strong players outplaying their low-rated opponents. Now c5, yet another move with a threat attacking the knight here. I don't really stop with those moves creating pressure against him. He plays knight to f5. Whenever I see that knight in all possible of positions like that in the Philidor defense or in the Old Indian defense, that is the opening we played here, I immediately take it on f5 because that makes those pawns doubled. Yes, he's getting the e-file open, but it gives me more space. Of course, the drawback, I had to exchange my knight for bishop, which normally I don't recommend to do, but here there is a very good reason. Well, I couldn't really save the bishop anyway. Bishop on e7 has nowhere to hide. So I'm taking it here to compromise his pawn structure and to get activated again because I have another move with a tempo. Rook goes to d8. Remember, the development is always the key to success. Develop all of your pieces as fast as possible and as active as possible. Rook d8, my opponent plays queen to c2, well, kind of improving his queen. And now I was spending so much time at this point of the game trying to calculate all of those ideas because I have this knight to g4 move, attacking the h2 pawn, creating a checkmate threat in 1. I have this move, knight f to g4, which is also creating a checkmate threat because I'm threatening to play knight f3 check, sacrificing the knight, he takes it, and then I'm gonna play queen h2. Let me show you this variation. He plays, let's say, h3, just pushing the knight away. Then knight f6, check, sacrificing, and queen h2, and I'm immediately given a checkmate. So that just doesn't work. So I figured after that move, he has to deal with it, and it's not that convenient because if he plays g3, he's gonna weaken his light squares, and knight f3 at least wins, well, actually an entire rook. So this variation never works for him. Then I thought he might play f4, and here is basically the reason why I thought the knight f2 g4 is not such a great idea, because if I remove my knight, then my attack is basically over, he's gonna push my second knight away, that's not a good strategy. But it turns out, and I have seen it afterwards, after I have made my next move in the game, that this variation actually works for me, because I can play c4 here and sacrifice the knight, because it's not possible to take it. Turns out there is not only bishop c5, which is quite great here, but also queen to c5. And then if you go away with a king, there is a very important smoother mate theme that you have to know, which is here with knight h3, and then, well, normally it goes like that, you sacrifice the queen, rook takes, and then you have knight f2 checkmate in the end, but in this case it's just a checkmate immediately because nobody is guarding the g1 square. And if you try to block it instead, this check after queen c5, then of course I can just take it and then threaten with some discovered checks, and of course threaten the queen. This position is absolutely winning for black. So that was my variations. Throughout this time I have spent quite a lot of time for my move, and I eventually played c4 because I thought, well, that is not that great. So I didn't see immediately this refutation against the move f4, but it turns out that objectively knight to g4 is not that great because there is bishop f4. And then, yeah, there are some crazy variations. Here you have knight f3 check once again, pawn takes, now queen takes f4, and I'm sacrificing so many pieces. The bishop is hanging here, I have sacrificed the knight in the first place, another knight is hanging, of course checkmate in one is a threat, so my opponent has to take it, but now if I just take it, then bishop g2, and I'm completely lost. I have a piece less, and I have absolutely zero compensation for it. So the right move instead is to play rook to g2. And now I'm not only threatening to take the queen, I'm also threatening with a checkmate in a few moves. And it's basically impossible to deal with both of the threats, so white has to give up the queen and then take on e7. I'm still taking on c3, so this crazy position in the end of the day is around equal. Black is a little bit better thanks to this passer here along the c file. So I'm playing the move c4. I decided, well, I still have all of my threats in mind, it's not that simple to stop it. At the same time, I have this knight d3 idea. At the same time, I'm freeing my square on c5 for my bishop, or maybe my queen, or maybe both if I play bishop c5 and queen a7, put pressure on the diagonal. At this point, I want to give you an advanced tip. A threat is almost always stronger than the execution. So if you have a very dangerous idea for your opponent, yes, you might go for it immediately, and if it's great for you, if you have calculated the variations, of course, go for it. But sometimes you're not really sure whether it's great or not, and you can make an improving move that creates even bigger threat for your opponent, and this threat still remains, and then your opponent has to handle the entire pressure that is on him right now, and that is how stronger opponents are taking advantage of weaker ones, because they're creating those multiple threats, not really executing it maybe immediately and leaving it for the future, and then, yeah, one or another is gonna work and the opponent is gonna collapse. That is the recipe for success, so I'm playing here the move c4. And here is the moment where the most beautiful combination I have played in this year begins. My opponent plays bishop f4, and I have here 1 minute and 48 seconds. I'm making my move in 1 second. Why? Because, well, I have spent the minutes before that calculating all of those long variations with knight g4 and everything, and I concluded that my opponent doesn't have a move bishop f4. Why? Well, because I have this check, and then he takes it, and I'm just taking the bishop, his pawns are incredibly bad, and I'm just winning. And I'm making this move in 1 second. But what I'm missing, completely missing, is that in the end of the line, my bishop on e7 is just hanging. So I'm just giving up the bishop. And when I played it, I noticed that he took it, and then I noticed that my bishop is hanging, and I was like, oh my god, I have just blundered the bishop. I have played the game so great so far, and I'm just blundering it. How could I have just spoiled it like that? But then, well, I have to continue, right? I can't take my move back, so I have to take it. He takes it here, and I'm thinking like, okay, what can I do now? What are my options? Maybe I can still put some pressure on his king because, well, there is nothing else I can do. I have to go into the attack, because if my attack is over, I'm losing the game immediately because I'm just a piece down. So please feel free to pause the video for a second and find here how black completely wins the game. I hope you have found it, because that is the reason why my opponent accused me of cheating, because actually, to make it a proper combination, I should have calculated that when I played the move knight to f3, because I'm really sacrificing the bishop here for a very good reason. I'm playing now rook to d2, and I'm improving my piece with a tempo. A move with a tempo is a very important concept in chess. It happens when you're improving your position, improving one of your pieces, or maybe go on with your plan, but at the same time you create a threat against your opponent, so he can't continue with his plan maybe, and you're winning this time. And the time is the most important thing in chess, because if you're given a few free tempo, you can basically do whatever you want on the board and win the game entirely. So time matters hugely. And winning this tempo, improving my rook's position, he goes somewhere with the queen, and now comes the brilliant move here, which is completely winning. And that wasn't that difficult for me to find at this point, because I don't have any choice. Either I make this brilliant move and win the game immediately, or I'm just completely busted. I absolutely have no other ideas, like queen takes f3 doesn't work because the rook is hanging, queen g5 doesn't help because he can just block it. So the brilliant move, pause the video for a second if you want to find it yourself, it's knight to g4. I'm threatening checkmate in one, and even though the knight is hanging, he cannot take it, because afterwards queen takes f2, king h1, queen h2, checkmate. But if you notice carefully what's gonna happen here, there is absolutely no way to stop the checkmate. Queen takes h2 is coming, you cannot protect it, you cannot take here, even if you sacrifice the queen, that still doesn't help, because I'm still gonna take the h2 pawn with a checkmate. You might somehow escape with your bishop, trying to find a way for the king to escape, but it's not possible, because once again I give a checkmate. You might try to escape this way, with bishop to g2, but it still doesn't help, because I have check, check, and then checkmate on f1. So there is absolutely no way to stop the checkmate. And when I played knight g4, I still wasn't sure about that, because, well, I thought that's my only chance, and it seems to work, because at least you can take the knight and threaten the checkmate. But as he thought about his move, and he thought about it like more than a minute, he spent all of his time, but he couldn't find the solution, because there is absolutely no solution. Checkmate is unstoppable here, and the game is over. I mean, that is just hilarious. And immediately after the game, he wrote me, accusing me of cheating, and I was just laughing, because I actually blundered the bishop. I mean, that is crazy. Have you ever blundered your piece and it turned out to be an incredibly brilliant combination? Let me know in the comments. Now, I want to really help you be able to play such a great game yourself. To do that, I have prepared for you one of the most instructive games in the entire chess history. You're gonna learn so much out of it. You're never gonna look at chess the same way afterwards. In this video, you can take a look at it, and please thank me later.